Serious, people who have survived a murder attempt by dumb luck. What's your story? My husband and I live above our place of business. Our alarm company called us at 3 AM to say there was a motion detector alert. Just one. In a weird place. We assumed it was a mouse but went to check it out. Husband ended up face to face with a burglar who was on his way out the window he had broken. He ran back inside. I called 911 and we heard mad chaos going on in the depths of the building. So much crashing and smashing. Burglar monkey climbed a 10-foot iron gate, bodily smashed through 2 sets of commercial grade glass doors and was outside again. My husband was like, yeah, frick this dude. Tore after him and tackled him. He got him on the ground and pinned him. Bear in mind the whole time I'm narrating to 911 and chasing around in panties and tank top. I was a bit behind my husband, in the middle of the street about 15 feet away when a minivan squealed around the corner. It was his GF getaway driver. I luckily missed it. I was super focused on reading the license plate, which was one of those cutesy font out of state ones and therefore hard to read, but she yelled, "Get the frick off him or I'm running your B over." Then she tried to. The audio and video I had to watch for the trial was horrifying. I had blocked it out nearly completely and really didn't remember how close it was. She guns the engine at me. I throw my hands up in front of my face when I realize what she's doing and scream and jump out of the way with inches to spare. He jumped in and off they went. He bled all over my husband. Yikes. And eventually the DNA and the partial plate info nailed them. They're both in prison. Addendum. Trials suck. ETA. To make this clear, do not do this. Adrenaline is a heck of a drug and it's best to not fight burglars. We definitely both could have died. It was the 3rd time this sucker had broken in and caused $XXX amount of mostly uninsured damage and inventory loss, and that definitely contributed to the whole thing. He wouldn't have stopped doing it. He was a pro and was doing upwards of 3 jobs a night most nights, all over the state, for years. Bear in mind the whole time I'm narrating to 911 and chasing around in panties and tank top. And this, my friends, is why I never sleep naked. I posted this before. I still harbor a sickening fear when I am over my head in water. I'm now 77 YO. Repost. Attempted drowning in Lake Michigan by a mental patient on leave with family. I was 8. He lured me into deep water by throwing my sand shovel. He pushed me under. I passed out. He was noticed and seized. They did artificial respiration on me. Men on the beach. Many were medics. This close to end of WW2. Still very frightened of getting in over my head. I'm 75. That crap doesn't go away. That's terrifying. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother but I would always stop her. I was 8. She was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep roped off part but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me, making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water and I got scared and started to swim back, but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me, but after she aggressively pushed me under the 3rd time I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation, but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister, who had already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice she said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry, I tried to drown you." It wasn't until I was almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do to someone. You might have taught her empathy that day with your self-defense tactic. You might have saved someone's future life and kept her out of prison. Thank you for the silver. I was 15-16. At a party. I went outside on a balcony for a smoke with someone I was talking to, and there was already a guy out there. We chatted as a group, and the friend went back inside. I started chatting with the guy who was already out there, who seemed a little funny. He started talking about how he was in the army for a little bit but got kicked out, then pulled out a big knife and handed it to me. I looked at it and gave it back to him. At that point he pushed me against the edge of the balcony, put the knife to my neck, looked me in the eye, and said, "Do you know why I wanted to join the army? I wanted to freaking kill people, man. People just like you." He then made a slicing sound with his mouth and took the knife away, then started laughing. I went inside, grabbed my GF, and we locked ourselves in a bedroom. He ended up smoking a lot of M that night and was kneeing holes in the wall and beating on the door. I slept with my knife under my pillow. The next morning he seemed totally normal, except for the fact that he had turned his jeans into short shorts. Freaking scary looking back on it. Serious. I had a guy high on both M and acid break into my apartment in college. Somehow he was convinced he lost his glasses inside. I'm doing dishes when my door gets slammed open. Next thing I know, he is behind me. I am being choked to death in my kitchen. As I was losing consciousness, I grabbed my roommate's acrylic bong and frantically swung over my shoulder into his face. The bong broke but did nothing as the guy was choking me even harder. So I swung it again. Because the bong broke the first time, I was hitting the guy with a 6-inch claw of acrylic glass. Afterward, his scalp and part of his cheek were hanging off the side of his face. Essentially, I scalped him with a bong. So I chased the guy out of my house. There is easily 2 feet of snow outside. He tries walking back to his house through a cemetery as a shortcut. Seriously. And he passes out in the cemetery. The police only found him because I called the cops and they followed the blood and footprints through the snow. And that's the part I was surprised about the most. I hit the guy on his scalp. There isn't much blood in a scalp compared to most the body, but my kitchen was covered in blood. His blood was on my refrigerator, counter, floor and ceiling. It was almost as traumatic to clean it. My roommates were gone for winter break. Thank God my roommate's girlfriend came over and helped me. Now as for the guy, the cops couldn't charge him for 2 days because he needed blood transfusions. He was charged with assault, breaking and entering and attempted murder. And he def had drugs on him too. Not sure what he got convicted of, but he went to jail for 4 years. There is a lot of blood in your head. Even a small cut will bleed longer and more than most other body parts. I was pushed off a cliff by a former friend at his own birthday party. He was 14 and I was like 12. We were on a hike, just the 2 of us, and he took a detour and we reached a steep cliff and he just up and pushed me off. I caught onto a tree root that was jutting out. There was a big tree growing right where I fell. The root grew in a way that part of it was exposed and made a surprisingly good handle. He didn't catch on and simply left me there. I was there for about an hour if I had to guess, until someone else was alerted to my presence and managed to get me back up. I still have nightmares about it. I don't know why he did it, but he had been an insane butthole to me for a long time in retrospect. What happened to the kid? He got in some kind of trouble, right? A customer pushed me onto a roller coaster track in the station. I work in a theme park. Luckily rides are covered in sensors, and I tripped one, which stopped the ride. I was 16 and staying in my older brother's house. In the house was my older brother and his wife, their 2 children and my sister's daughter. I was sleeping on the sofa as my brother and I had been playing Gran Turismo on the PlayStation late. Anyway, the weekend before, my brother had a bit of a get together with friends and family and someone tried to gate crash it. The guy started a fight, got beat, and then left. The following Thursday was the day I was staying, and at 5 AM I find myself awake in the bathroom with blood squirting from my head and the bath had loads of blood in it. Next thing I know is I'm back downstairs in the living room looking in the mirror. Blood still gushing from my head and all over the furniture, walls, kids' toys. The guy who tried gate crashing the party the previous weekend had brought a friend and kicked the front door open. His friend went upstairs to the master bedroom to attack my brother, while the main guy got me while sleeping. He started hitting me on the head with a claw hammer. With the claw part, after a while I remembered that I woke up and had automatically kicked out at him and hit him clean on the nose, breaking his nose. He said, "That's the last thing you're gonna do, you wee bastard." The next thing I knew, I was in the bathroom, etc. Police were called and they were found, just after dropping their weapons and scarves which they used to cover their faces. They only got 5 years each for attempted murder. Not long after getting out of jail, one of them committed suicide. Sadly, it wasn't the one who tried to kill me. Serious. 3 men drugged me and kidnapped me. I woke up on a floor with one of them tearing my clothes off and my moon boot. Broken foot. I tried kicking him off with the boot but he started knocking my head into the floor and I passed out. I woke up in daylight in a garbage bin. Naked and in a pool of my own blood. I don't know how the frick I got out of there or how I found the nearest policeman, but I then collapsed again. Woke up in a hospital with 52 stitches in my head and 78 in and around my vulva and breasts. Doctor said it was the worst rape trauma she ever saw. They say it's a miracle I'm alive and don't know how I did it. They were never caught. I am a crisis, trauma and PTSD counselor now. They didn't win. About 10 years ago I used to share a 3-bedroom apartment with a friend. So we had a spare room. At some point he told me he had met some nice guy who was older and a philosophy book translator, and he was looking for a place. I thought the extra money would be nice so I was okay with it. So the guy moves in. He's very reclusive so we don't talk much, but I start to get a weird vibe from him. One day I had to go to work meeting about 3 hours earlier than normal, so I woke up, dressed and left. He and my other friend had already left. So the apartment was left unattended. The meeting was over sooner than I anticipated, so I decided I would have lunch at home. When I arrive at the building, there's a fire truck in the streets, and the doorman runs towards me as soon as he sees me, telling that there was a gas leak in my apartment and they had to cut the gas to the whole building, and they were about to break into the apartment to check. When I enter the apartment I immediately smell the gas, and when I go check the kitchen I see all the stove's valves open. I called my friend and told him what happened. He called the other guy and he didn't answer. I went to check his bedroom and it was empty. The guy just left with all his stuff and tried to asphyxiate me while I slept. I didn't pursue it, and we never heard of the guy again. Serious. The 18th of May, 2018. School shooting at Santa Fe High School. I was a sophomore at the time. Don't really want to dive into the details, but I remember running through the grass thinking that they were shooting into the crowd of kids running. Scariest moment of my life, but at least I am here for the 1-year anniversary of it all. You always hear about it on the news, but when it actually happens in your school it changes your life. I hope you are doing good now. I'm very sorry that happened to you. My brother has BPD and is totally incapable of controlling his emotions. He saw red and came at me with a steak knife and stabbed me several times in the neck. I guess I was lucky in that most of the stabs glanced off me as I was protecting myself with my arms. He didn't really strike any clean shots where it could have caused me to bleed seriously, but he wasn't really aiming. A few inches to the left and he could have hit a major vein. I knew someone who had this exact same situation happen, only she wasn't so lucky. Her brother came at her with a kitchen knife in the morning before they were supposed to leave for high school. If I recall correctly, her mom was getting ready, and when she came down to the kitchen to see what the noise was about, it was too late. She says she lost both her kids that day. Posting for my dad. I'll call him John. He grew up during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and at the time there were numerous tit-for-tat shootings between Republicans and Loyalists. My dad was walking home when a car pulled up quickly and men with masks, bats and guns jumped out. He started running but they caught up with him. Just as they got to him they stopped and one pulled off his balaclava and said, "Oh crap, John, didn't realize it was you. Thought you were someone else, we're so sorry." He said he genuinely thought he was about to die there and then, and if he had of been someone else he would have been. When I was around 12, I had a friend who shared a room with a disabled younger brother. They had a Super Nintendo in their room, but because of how the furniture was arranged, the only place you could sit where you could see the TV well and play was on the younger brother's bed. We'd sit there and play all the time, and the little brother would frequently be there with us. It's no big deal. One day, my friend's mom wasn't home, so it was just the 3 of us in the house. We were in our usual SNES spot, sitting on the edge of the younger brother's bed. The little brother walked in and just lost his mind, screaming and crying because we were sitting on his bed, which, again, he'd been fine with every other time I'd been over. After a little bit, he ran out of the room for a couple minutes and got quiet. Suddenly, he ran back through the door, slashing at the air with a big chef's knife from the kitchen, screaming, "Get off my Thomas." My friend grabbed a long piece of sporting equipment and shoved him out the door with it. I slammed it closed. The bedroom door had no lock, So we spent the next hour taking turns bracing the door with our feet while his little brother wailed and stabbed at the door from the other side. Eventually, he tired himself out and went to watch TV in the living room, but we kept that door barred until their mother got home. It turns out that just that morning, their mom had put a brand new Thomas the Tank Engine comforter on the little brother's bed and he was furious that we were sitting on it. I don't know what happened with the brother after that, because after she saw the damage to the door, she immediately drove me home and asked me not to tell my parents. I still hung out with my friend, but only at my house and far away from the younger brother. Goddamn. I was 3 years old. It was actually my first memory. My father was drunk and blaming me for all his problems and pointing a rifle at me. My mother talked him down from it. He has zero recollection of the event because he was so drunk, but I remember it clearly, and I tell my mother that I didn't remember it. Only person that knows is my wife. Not certain if it was a murder attempt or a kidnapping attempt, so I had just spent a few hours with my girlfriend in the town center and had just dropped her back at home. This is England in the winter, so it was dark fast. I had walked the majority of the way home through what isn't the best area of my town, when I realized two guys had been following me for a good portion of my walk. The thing is, they were clearly following me too. Every time I turned, they would too. I even started making loops to make sure. Now I'm around 6 foot 1 inch and am mainly muscle due to a background in rugby and martial arts. So I'm not exactly the best target to take on when it comes to something like this. Anyways, I ended up just pulling a 180 spin and walking directly towards both men. Yeah, I know that was dumb, but it seemed the best choice. I don't know why. And this seemed to freak them out, so they just let me past. Although they didn't stop following me till I got back onto the main street too. So, my mom's ex was crazy. Like, he had a therapist for mental instability. Well, arguments were common between us, and one morning was like no other. This time, however, he grabbed a pocket knife that he had stashed away. We yelled some more and he tried to brush past me to get to my mom, who was partially disabled and on the couch. Lizard brain kicks in and I'm thinking one thing: not to let him near her. I grab him on the shoulder and pull him to the ground. I secured the knife and gave a few knocks for the trouble. At this point I feel a warmth on my belly. It was like I peed myself, but it wasn't on my pants. I realized what had happened and I thanked human biology for adrenaline. I had my mom get me a warm compact and call 911. I laid in my blood, putting pressure on my stomach until they got there. I hear you asking, what about the ex? Where is he? Oh, he's in the kitchen fixing his morning cup of coffee. He was shocked when the cops came in and threw him to the ground. Like I said, crazy. I never actually felt any pain until after surgery, and all I knew about was my stomach. 3 days later I'm discharged from the hospital with a 6-inch laceration to the abdomen, a 3-inch laceration to the right ribs, and a 1-inch laceration on the back right thigh just under my butt cheek. I find out during a follow-up that the main reason I'm alive is because I'm fat. My belly fat stopped the knife from doing any actual internal damage. Go figure, right? When I was in kindergarten I was using the bathroom. At my school we didn't go to the bathrooms that everyone else used. We shared 2 toilets with another classroom. One was a boys' bathroom and the other was a girl bathroom. I was using the bathroom one day and all of a sudden a boy who was in my class walked in. I told him to leave because he was a boy and this was the girls' bathroom. He proceeded to walk in, close the door behind him and grab me by my hair. He then slammed my head to the wall, and then to the floor. Then he sat on me and proceeded to punch and slap me over and over again. He also forced a few kisses on me. I screamed and screamed until 3 teachers ran in and pulled him off of me. After this incident I didn't see him anymore, but my mother ended up pulling me out of that school anyhow. Oh, Jesus. I'm sure you know now what that was. Kids imitate their parents at that age. That sucks all around, but that kid had one tragic as heck home life. Me ex, who I absolutely think is a narcissist, snapped one night. He had a few beers and was sitting at the kitchen table. I had just put my 2 children to bed about an hour before. He starts slamming his fists down on the table. I went over to him to ask him to stop, as the kids just got to sleep and had school the next day. He gets pretty physical and chases me through the house. We went toe to toe a few times, but it only ever lasted a minute tops. The longer this went on I knew it was different. I decide to try to run out of the house to get him away from the kids. No idea how they slept through it, but I'm so glad they did. He catches me just before I get to the door and starts strangling me with both hands. I couldn't get his hands off my neck or bat his arms away. My vision starts to recede around the edges and I know I'm going to die. I throw a wild punch and hit him square in the throat. I put everything I had behind it. I'm 5'1" and at the time weighed 120 lbs. He immediately falls to the floor, wound up passing out. He moved out the next day. I moved out of state a few months later. Armed security for a ghetto mall. Got a guy trespassed for theft. He popped for felon warrants. He was a part of the local United Bloods Nation. Him and his crew vowed revenge against me and the cops. 2 weeks later, I'm talking to a guy who sells flying RC toys in the front entrance. 4-door sedan rolls up, windows roll down. This is where memory stops and my bodycam fills in the story. They open fire. I immediately push the guy to my left down to the ground. I unholster my Glock 19 and immediately start trying to return fire. I remember the screaming, gunfire, smelling of blood, but not anything else. Looking back, I was carrying 18 rounds and 15 and 15 and 15. I was wearing a Sapphire Defense Level 3 vest. Thank God. I repositioned, re-engaged. I had an angle of the back windshield. Man, I just blasted it. I kept shooting and shooting and shooting. After what felt like forever, vehicle speeds off. I holster. I'm immediately alerted to a mother screaming that her 9-year-old has been shot. I immediately rush over. I see blood just pouring out of the poor child's neck. I put as much pressure as I possibly can on the GSW, but the eyes stopped being alive. Breathing did as well. EMT are here. Pull me back. I see PD with service rifles. I see an old friend was a cop. I do remember this. He yells, "Check yourself. Whose blood is that?" The girl's behind me. "Bro, you have 2 holes in your vest. Come on, let's get you checked out. Let me see your duty belt." That's when, as I've been told, because I don't remember this part, I immediately dropped. They flew me to a hospital. Apparently, I was shot 3 times. Once, upper left arm, and 2 in my vest. Disclaimer. This took place a few years ago, and as the years go by, I remember more. There are still some missing parts that I've been told that I don't remember. Like, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I don't remember the last 8 months of that year. I was told that I came to the hospital and said I was a hero, and to come get my firearm whenever I am able to. Yet, I don't even know who the guy is, of the county. Apparently I also killed a man too. But all I know is a 9-year-old girl died, and I didn't do my job. I'm alive. But thank God gangbangers can't aim. Jesus freaking Christ. Dude, you definitely did your job as well as anybody could have. It's a mall. For Christ's sake. It isn't supposed to be under siege. I'm sorry you have to live with that guilt, but I really hope you're able to find peace with it and understand that it wasn't remotely your fault. Domestic murder attempt. I went to a Halloween party where my boyfriend at the time was, and walked in to see him with a chick on his lap. I went over and asked him what the heck he was doing. He was drunk and didn't respond. So I left and went to our shared mobile home and went to bed. I awoke to him dragging me out of bed by my hair, calling me a stupid C and how dare I barge in on him like that I was invited, and he threw me to the ground and punched me in the face. I got up as quickly as I could and grabbed the home phone and ran to the bedroom, shut and locked the door, and put my back against it and tried to call my parents. He thought I was calling the police and barged the door down on top of me, and I wiggled my way into the bathroom before his intoxicated butt could stand up. I did the same thing with the door and he crashed it down, except this time it hit the countertop, so I had a very small window of space to try and escape from. He grabbed me by the shirt and then the neck and slammed my forehead into the wall. I dropped the phone and escaped his grip, ran out to his small Toyota truck, our only vehicle, and got in and locked the door. He came out swinging a piece of rebar and I booked it out of there as fast as possible. That was the end of that, except for the fact that my parents believed him over me and that I somehow deserved it. If he had a weapon he would have murdered me. My father was bipolar and extremely violent, having outbursts of just rage. One day I was crying a lot. I was 2, and he covered my mouth and nose to make me stop. My mom came in after to find me purple on the couch not breathing. She immediately called 911 and from what I know they performed CPR. My father said he took a step out to smoke and I must have done it to myself on the couch. It wasn't till I was 13 that one of his girlfriends contacted my mom and told her the truth. This wasn't the only case. I remember hearing a loud bang as I felt drywall fall on my face. Looked down to my father was standing in the door laughing. I guess he shot at me and found it hilarious. I was 14 and a runaway, living on the streets with other street kids. I was hanging out with this one guy, we'll call him John, and he invited me to sleep that night in this hidden abandoned apartment in a closed parking garage that he had been staying in. I accepted, but there was no funny business as I wasn't interested. Everything's cool and we go to sleep. In the early hours of the morning he wakes me up and tells we gotta go because the place is on fire. The room is filled with smoke and the doorway to the room we were in was in flames, so we had to jump over the fire to get out. We managed to get out but we were covered in soot. I was so thankful that he saved my life. I must have thanked him 100 times that day for saving me, and I still thought about him long after I went back home a few weeks later. About a year later I'm on the bus when I see two people I used to know from back then. We chatted a few. Then I asked about if they knew John. They tell me yeah, they knew John and asked me if I knew he had tried to kill some girl. The shock look on my face told them I didn't know, and they tell me this story about John taking some girl to that old parking garage and then setting the place on fire. He was going to kill her but at the last minute changed his mind and ran back in and woke her up. And that's the day I found out the guy who saved my life had actually chickened out on murdering me. It might be why I still have trust issues from time to time. It wasn't technically a murder attempt, but I was almost the victim of a serial killer. This was in Austin, Texas, in 1993. I was leaving the campus on Friday evening from the 40 acres parking area and crossed the bridge over the freeway. A woman came up to the car and asked if I could drive her to her house a couple of blocks away. I was a pretty naive 18-year-old, didn't realize she was really a witch, and said yes. She gave me directions and asked if I could give her some money for groceries. I had a $20 and gave it to her. She asked what I wanted and I said I just wanted to help. She looked at me for a second and said pull over right here. Get out of here as fast as you can. So I pulled over and she said go fast. Turns out the police had been keeping quiet about 3 or 4 robbery murders in the area. I saw the woman on the news a few years later when they finally found the killers. Bit late to the party but something I can actually respond to. Worked in a restaurant with a chef who suffered with bipolar but also refused to take their medication. Self-medicated with coke instead. Told me to tell our boss he resigned. I did. He retracted the next day and said I had lied, which my boss did not believe as he trusted me a lot and knew I would not benefit from that, as prior to the resignation, me and the chef were very much best friends. Next thing I know, he's quit for ELCs and we operated with limited menu minus our head chef. I worked a split shift. On my break I'm walking home and see a car fly past at a junction. Ignore it and carry on walking. Then, the car rapidly reverses and veers towards me. In a split second I had to decide whether I was in danger or not. No idea who was behind the wheel. I chose to jump into a garden next to me and seconds later this car halts exactly where I had been standing. The chef then leans out the window and screams insult after insult at me, blaming me for his quitting his job and claims he had no knowledge of our conversation where he quit. He then reversed and revs towards me. I run out of the garden and he rapidly revs and follows me. A lorry pulls up at the junction and sees the situation and shouts if I'm okay. This distracted the chef and I ran so fast all the way home. I walked through my front door and cried so much I could barely move because I was bent over double trying to breathe. Now, I never get involved in anything at my work. My boss is very protective of me thankfully and I feel safe. For a long time, even now a little, I was terrified to walk on my own but also terrified I would risk someone getting hurt if he saw me again. I frequently have nightmares and am terrified if a chef loses his temper, which they do often. Sorry for the essay. I know no one will see this but it's good to write it out. I was a child and in school. I wasn't feeling well and had to go to the nurse. As I was going there an older student pulled me into an alleyway. He raped me and started choking me. Everything went black after a bit. Then I woke up him running off. I think someone had started to come nearby and scared him. I blamed myself, still have issues with guilt, and it gave me a laundry list of psychological disorders. Posted this in RS Credit a couple years ago. Almost 20 years ago now. I had a guy offer to walk with me. It was 3 AM. I'm a guy, at that point a fairly wild one who didn't think about being anywhere, doing anything, time of day, etc. The dude just kind of appeared on the street across from me. He started half shouting a monologue at me. At first I just ignored it, figuring he is hammered drunk. Told him that I'm good and kept strutting, not thinking twice about him. A dog trotted out of some yard and started walking next to me. He asked if it was mine. Nope. Then he asked if I smoked weed. I told him yup, so he asked how I wanted to share a joint. Nope. Then he told me he'd sprinkle some coke on it if I wanted. Nope. The whole time he hasn't crossed the street. He's just woofing at me, but he's looking around all over the place. Seems to be checking to see if there are any other people out. My spidey senses started to tingle at that point. I was only a few blocks from my house, so I figured I'd just keep walking and head in. That's when he asked if I wanted to see his gun. No thanks. Instead of going home, I turned into a gangway between two houses and realized that an acquaintance of mine lived in one of the houses, so I started pounding on her door. After a few seconds I peeked out to the street and didn't see the guy, so I wandered out to the front yard, looked around and he was gone. Disappeared. Maybe. 3 weeks later I saw in the newspaper that the police had arrested a guy who was a suspect in several sexual assaults, rapes and murders in the general area over a period of years. It was that dude. If something feels out of the ordinary or uncomfortable, trust your instinct. I'm not sure if the intention was murder, but I love telling this story cause my dog was awesome. When I was 5 I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dog barking. She was a 9-year-old German Shepherd. She was always very well behaved, so her barking was a bit alarming, but I brushed it off and went back to sleep. I wake up the next morning to the news that she was barking at 2 men who had broken into our house. She chased them away before they could do anything. She passed away a few years ago and now resides next to our TV in a little urn. I was walking to a bus station at 6 in the morning, and some dude on the sidewalk pushed me over and sliced at my throat with a knife, then walked off. Luckily his knife was blunt as frick, and so I got away with just a cool scar. I asked a guy who had witnessed the whole thing to help me call the police, and he said nah. Then I went on with my day. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.